I love that part. Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, the place where you're in the know. You can find us online at commonwealthclub.org, on Facebook and Twitter, and on your YouTube channel. I'm Joseph Fink. I'm the President Emeritus of Dominican University in Marin County, and I'm the former chairman of the board of the Commonwealth Club. More importantly, I'm your moderator for tonight's program. It's now my privilege to introduce our speaker. Willie Brown is an iconic figure in American politics. He served the city of San Francisco, the state of California, and the United States of America for more than a half of a century. Two-term mayor of San Francisco, legendary Speaker of the California State Assembly. His career has spanned at the American presidency from Lyndon Johnson to Barack Obama. And he has worked with every California governor from Pat Brown and Jerry Brown twice. He served 2 terms as the 41st mayor of the city and county of San Francisco. He was the Speaker of the Assembly from 1980 to 1996, the longest serving speaker in California history. He was reelected 16 straight times from the 13th Assembly District in San Francisco. He also served on the Board of Trustees of the California State University System, 23 campuses and 350,000 students. He was a regent for the University of California, 10 campuses and 200,000 students. He was also on my Board of Trustees at Dominican, 1 campus, 2,500 students. He's received over 20 honorary degrees from institutions of higher education. Today, he heads the Willie L. Brown Institute on Politics and Public Service, and he writes a column for the San Francisco Chronicle. He advises, and his advice and his support is constantly sought by both novices and veterans seeking political office. As a personal aside, I can tell you directly, in 2003 or 4, I think it was, he contacted me and said, I want you to come to an event. There's this interesting guy running for the Senate in Illinois named Barack Obama. And I said, Barack Obama? Illinois? You want me to go to an event for that? He said, Joe, I promise you, you won't be sorry. I didn't go, and I've been sorry ever since. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Willie Brown.
He gets more inventive every year. On the introduction, I'm always fascinated to see what he's going to say, particularly since no one else gets equal time. I am, of course, delighted to be back with the Commonwealth Club. It's something we started a few years ago, and it's blossomed into mandatory attendance for me. I don't know about you, but it's mandatory attendance for me. I must also tell you that I rather enjoyed. I had not anticipated, however, having to come all the way to this side of town this year. I had been promised that I would be on the Embarcadero, which I had something to do with, that I would be able to lecture in Seymour Bridge, which I had something to do with, because the Commonwealth Club was building new quarters. And in San Francisco, if you're building 3 or 4 stories, you know, that's like 3 or 4 months. But as is the case with the Commonwealth Club, They're so particular about every square inch of what's being put there. They want it to last for the next 100 years, and they apparently are testing it inch by inch. Because it's taken longer to build the new Commonwealth headquarters at about 4 stories than it is to build the Salesforce Tower at 60 stories. And I just said to George tonight, you know, George, I was supposed to be literally one of the first persons lecturing at the new headquarters. And it is really magnificent, or I should say, it's going to be magnificent. It's right next door to my law office. I'm in the penthouse of Boulevards, and I enter from that side, and every day I go by. What the Commonwealth Club did when they blocked off, and when you build things now, you block off and you put all kinds of posters of different kinds of things that you want people to see. And the Commonwealth Club, being the organization that it is, wanted people to see the people who would be making presentations, had previously made presentations, etc. And I watched them put all these up, and there is my portrait. And I was just overjoyed. And the next day I came back, the only portrait that had already been graffitied was mine. And I'm really pissed off because that was about 2 or 2.5 years ago. They have not touched Condoleezza Rice. Condoleezza Rice is still as pristine and clean as it was the first day. In me, I'm without teeth. I have hair. It's amazing what they've done. And fortunately, they've done so much that when I'm standing there talking to somebody, they don't recognize that that's me. But you're going to be surprised that when they finally do finish, it really is going to be an added attraction, event space for this city, probably like no other. It really is and has been designed in such a way, and it's being meticulously cared for as it is being built. And while I kid about it, I'm frankly eager, and I am absolutely insistent, since there's absolutely no compensation whatsoever for these lectures. You know, you go over at Cal, and if you're a right-wing nut, you get $75,000 to appear over there. And or if you're Hillary Clinton and it's it's Google, you get $200,000 fee. Commonwealth Club, you get nothing. Well, I'm going to insist that the Commonwealth Club allow me to be the first person to lecture as they open the new facility in view of. And the only way, and you always must in politics have leverage, so the only way that is going to be granted, I'm sure they've already had some kind of a calendar like they have calendars for everything, but they can disrupt that calendar very easily. And the way in which I'm going to get them to disrupt the calendar, you've got to pledge that you want to attend another one of their events when they move to the new place unless I have lectured. This year has been extraordinary for those of us who are in the world of politics. I'm obviously no longer an elected official, but it's sometimes difficult to figure out that I'm no longer elected because I'm showing up more than the electeds in many cases because I'm just interested. And this year has just been absolutely magnificent with the amount of information. As a matter of fact, you're almost on information overload. It's the first time, I think, in this country in a very long time that ordinary people are actually paying some attention to what's being discussed in the world of public policy making. And I trace that back to probably May of 2015, when Donald Trump announced that he would be a candidate for the Republican nomination for the presidency. Following his announcement, there were another few people announced. It blossomed up to about 16 people running for that nomination. For those of you who read the column, you know at some point during the course of that period of all of those debates and what have you, I predicted that Donald Trump would win the Republican nomination. And of course, I got roundly condemned by my fellow Democrats. Many of them thought that I was making a joke, but I really was not making a joke. I had quickly come to the conclusion that the talent that was among the 15 people that were participating beyond Trump, that on each equal matchup, Trump was always superior in every one of the categories that people usually look to, in my opinion, for vote purposes. And of course, he did win the nomination. One by one, the most talented among those Republican prospective nominees fell by the wayside. And it came down to the last person standing was the governor of Ohio. And clearly he was not up to meet the task of dealing with a person who clearly was the greatest marketer ever to run for president. The individual marketing skills of this man, who's now our president, were just so superior to everybody else who was running in that contest. And then suddenly, Trump is the nominee. And Democrats start licking their chops. They absolutely knew that this was a home run, that this was like the Warriors versus the world. That no question that who's going to win it, so to speak. And I tried my best to caution my fellow Democrats, to suggest to them that it was possible to win, but it must be treated as a possibility, not of a certainty. They spent more time, frankly, planning the inauguration and the activities surrounding the win, rather than trying to figure out how to reach the voters. Donald Trump clearly knew that he could not win a majority of the regular people voting. He clearly understood that he needed to go for people who had maybe never voted before or who had not voted recently, and he knew that they would not be moved by billboards, they would not be moved by constant communications with political pieces that we normally do. He knew they wouldn't be moved by robocalls. He knew that they would be moved by something differently. And he went for the old kinds of things that was done years ago in this country, and that was the business of having evangelical commitments and involvements. And, you know, the evangelists who came through town and beat the drums and did the things that was done and caused people to want to show up. That's what Trump went, and that became his mode of operation. All of those rallies, none of which at any point, I think, recorded anybody's name or number, they were the kind of things that generated constant interest from a whole group of people who had not participated in the voting before. No way that was going to translate into a majority. But the Trump, I think, understood that Hillary Clinton's candidacy was not Barack Obama's candidacy. Barack Obama's candidacy had been so unique in this nation, it had come upon us at a time much sooner than any of us had ever dreamed would come for a true African-American candidate who could do the crossover and actually possibly win. What happened in the Obama years was that he maximized the opportunity for people to participate who were from the poor side of the aisle, who were racial minorities, who were from the recent immigrant community, people who had not been in the body politic, not the kind of people Trump went after who hadn't been in the body politic, but a whole new breed of people. He also, at the same time, attracted the intellectuals. He attracted the Harvard graduates and all the people who had the multiple degrees. He also attracted the people from the social media world. He attracted the media world in a positive way. He became literally a rock star in the world of politics without doing anything really to earn it in terms of performance. He said all the right things and delivered good words, and he really drove people. No Bernie Sanders could have ever matched what Barack Obama did with the young people, with the people who were, in many cases, first-time voters on an age bar basis. And so he really did do something differently. Trump knew that those people would not relate to Hillary. He had the assurance that they wouldn't relate to Hillary because Bernie Sanders, an octogenarian, almost my age, and not as good looking, he had managed, however, to drive people from that original Obama group, and they added to it. Hillary couldn't move them at all, in spite of the fact that her candidacy should have been as unique as Obama's, a female nominee for the presidency. That's never happened in this country. You would think that that would have been the sine qua non for the whole business of the last presidential campaign. You would have thought that with her incredible talent, and she probably is one of the most talented people ever to get the nomination of either party, you would think that someone with her distinguished record in her capacity as Secretary of State, bar none, there's probably been no Secretary of State of her equal in terms of contact and relationships, you would have thought that there's no way she doesn't win. But the Sanders phenom out there didn't translate into an enthusiastic group of new people like had been the case with Barack Obama. 22 states Bernie won. In those 22 states, most went for Trump in the end. And that clearly is an indication that that crowd of people did not go for Hillary. It was also kind of strange that women didn't go for Hillary. 53% of the women or more in this country voted for Donald Trump. Hillary never even possibly considered that. And Hillary's campaign was burdened with yesterday in terms of the measuring tools, the means by which you try to predict what the results would be. Trump had no use for the polls whatsoever because they were the techniques of measuring yesterday. They were the techniques of measuring people who were in the habit of voting. They never ever spoke to those folk in Kentucky, Joanne, and places like that where they had not voted ever on who they really wanted to vote. They didn't do anything in the Indiana piece, and clearly when he put Pence on the ticket, that took care of Indiana. And even where that guy in Utah wanted to run an independent operation, they didn't do anything there either because there was no reason to. I frankly think if Trump ever told the real truth, the same kind of people that measured his candidacy were the people that measured in England when they were trying to figure out how to get out of the EU. I bet you it was the same kind of people doing the tool and the measurement because under no circumstances the normal method of predicting from focus groups and otherwise paid dividends. As a matter of fact, the pollsters this time around in the presidential campaign were almost as far off as the weather people are regularly. And so it really was an incredible thing to see that would occur. But that's a combination. And then I think the most decisive, or one of the most decisive pieces, was Trump knew that this nation for a long time had been truly concealing this nation's true attitude on race. That there had been, for many, many years, a resentment that this nation had started to move and in some cases aggressively, towards some level of equality. It's not that Trump wanted to be a racist, but he knew that there was a hidden collection of white people in this country who would never admit that they have been waiting patiently to get even with all of us who've been doing the things that Brown versus the Board of Education, I suppose it was 1954 when Earl Warren wrote that historic decision, reversing Plessy versus Ferguson from 1896, and saying, in effect, separate but equal is unequal, and that you're going to remove the separate but equal clause. And when Lyndon Johnson came along, some 12 to 14 years later, adhering to what Martin Luther King Jr. and the freedom fighters all were arguing for, and I remember so clearly the speech when Mr. Johnson said, as he signed the Voting Rights Act and as he signed the Civil Rights Act, he opined that the Democratic Party would never again prevail from a vote standpoint in the South because the residual of the attitude of white people in this nation about black people that were allegedly being featured and being helped in that Brown versus Board of Education on those two measures that he signed, plus the activities that went on in multiple cities in this nation. He said the Democratic Party will never, ever again prevail in the South after I sign these measures. But he said it is the right thing to do. We didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what Mr. Johnson said. Trump, I'm sure, in the Trump world paid a whole lot of attention, and they've been waiting for years for this white backlash to step up and really express itself. And it had wonderful reasons in its own mind to engage in that activity, because suddenly you had a series of confrontations with police officers where black persons were shot and killed, and there were clearly a response to that in the nation, dramatic response to that in the nation at every level. You had a whole series of things going on with Black Lives Matter in organizations of that nature. And it really did generate a hidden level of response, unlike anything any of us had ever seen in this country. On the Democratic side of the aisle, we did not notice it closely. But the people who were showing up at some of those rallies did notice it, and they expressed themselves when they cast a vote because they genuinely thought that that would be an expression of the white backlash. And clearly Hillary Clinton's candidacy was the victim of that. A combination of all those things led to Donald Trump, and he is now the president of these United States. He did not anticipate that he was going to win. He had no speech prepared for purposes of accepting the victory. He was flabbergasted on the night of the election that it actually happened. Although all the things that I said that led up to it, there would be some level of predictability, but he did not know that, and he did not see that, and therefore he wasn't quite ready. Nor did he have an array of talent readily available to him. Almost everybody else who had run for the presidency in this nation had an array of talent available to them the day that they were elected. And that array of talent would come from the intellectual world, that array of talent would come from the business world, that array of talent would come from the philanthropic world, that array of talent would come, in some cases, from other parts of the world, or including race and gender. Most presidential persons had that. Reagan had a whole stable of folk, having been the governor of this state before the presidency. And obviously Lyndon Johnson had the same. And so did the Kennedys with their Harvard-based connection. I suppose one would say that Eisenhower didn't have, and no, he did not have, but he had apparently a better understanding of what it might take by virtue of the fact of having managed an army for so long. And he recruited people that he thought could do the job, and he probably didn't know any of them. Trump made the mistake, occupying essentially the same position of Eisenhower, he starts selecting his relatives. He starts selecting his friends. He starts selecting people that have done business with him. That's the worst collection of people, if you are in politics, that you can ever rely upon, are those people that know everything about you. There's just no way. You kind of want to go talented strangers so that you can conceal many of the warts that you have. If you've been exposed under the circumstances as Trump, and he got burdened with all of these folk. I've not seen a level of people in the cabinet that if they all put on their uniforms, you would look like you were in Brazil or El Salvador or Mexico or someplace where you see all these generals and all these people with these phony medals displayed on their uniforms, and with their uniforms never having ever been produced by Wilkes Bashford Stewart. So it was just it was kind of an amazing turn of events when you saw what Trump selected. And so it doesn't surprise me that practically every one of his selectees are ultimately going to have to be put out. They're going to have to be reassigned. They're going to have to be given immunity. They're going to have to, in order to save him, they're going to have to be given immunity not to testify. They really are a collection of people, in most cases, who are without the talent to do what needs to be done. Some have asked me, as I wander around the streets collecting info for the column, how long do you think Trump's going to last? He's going to last as long as he wishes to last, period. Just know that. I don't think the collection of evidence and all the things that have been done and all of the termination of people that he's doing is going to lead to any form of action by the Republicans to impeach him, unlike what happened with reference to Nixon so many years ago, back in the middle 70s, when Watergate went down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was the Republicans who caused Nixon to resign. The Democrats do not have the firepower. They do not have either the people who are doing the strategy. They are just without the kind of action that may ultimately translate itself into real definitive movements towards exercising all the constitutional authority that one can so exercise in this wonderful nation. It will have to come from the Republican side of the aisle, and there's just not a great amount of talent among those Republicans, and probably even less courage. If I hear one more time Lindsey Graham lying to us about how committed he is to the idea of honesty and evaluation and what have you, and he never does a thing. Only the cat from Arizona, the senator from Arizona, is the only one who appears to be totally and completely willing to be definitive on each and every one of the challenges that are being faced. If there is anything that might create a problem for Mr. Trump, in my opinion, over the next several months, is what happens with reference to the Russian connection. I suspect that if he would just back off and stop trying to fix it, rather than let it fix itself, and if it fixes itself the way in which I think it will fix itself, there will not be a sufficient amount of evidence to create anything other than an opportunity for columnists, an opportunity for Rachel Maddow, an opportunity for Morning Joe, an opportunity for the New York Times, an opportunity for the Washington Post to write glowingly about the horrors of this new president and to say all the things that they're saying about this new president with only pleasing the readership that they have and all of us who knows that in fact we should have been more diligent at trying not to allow him to become the president. Last night, when I was wandering on the streets after one of my activities, another person grabs me and starts ranting and raving about why we ought to be getting rid of Trump. I listened for a few minutes and I said, let me tell you something. While I may share all of your views, you need to ask a question for me. Did you vote? He said, why is that important? I said, the only way you can talk to me about what should happen with Trump is that you cast a vote, and that vote did not translate into the presidency. He said, well, obviously I didn't vote. I didn't realize I should have. That's the problem in this nation. They didn't realize that they should have. So Mr. Trump is with us, in my opinion, for 4 years. Joseph.
Thank you. Our thanks to Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, and our political commentator for this evening. We have a number of questions from the audience, Willie. The speech, by the way, was entitled Local, State, and National Politics, and there are a couple of local kinds of questions.
Well, before you go any further on that, though, local, state, and national, 30 minutes?
Well, I'll try to reserve the time in the appropriate way. But there are, let me ask at least one question about local and state politics tonight. Who should be, not who will be, but who should be the next mayor of San Francisco?
It's 2.5 years from now. I could not honestly answer that question today. The quality of the people whose candidacies have already surfaced have yet to demonstrate that they could really run this city. This city is a fabulous place to exercise political power and to do significant work that you can do and that needs to be done. And the person who is going to be the mayor following Ed Lee is going to have to be, in my opinion, a combination of Ed Lee, Gavin Newsom, the late Joe Alioto, Dianne Feinstein, and a little bit of me. And maybe even some Agnos. None of the people whose names are out there present a combination of all those qualities. And therefore, it's too early to project and predict. I can only tell you, though, that I think there are a number of quality people absolutely looking at the possibility, and they are all, the ones that I'm looking at, are newcomers. They've not run for any office at any time, anywhere. They don't need to be burdened with collecting donations to run or using public dollars to execute, and they are not thinking that they will be governor and that after that they'll be president. They really are people who are trying to figure out a way to make the system readily available to everybody in every category. And if some of those people get on the ballot, they're going to be awfully difficult to beat.
Okay, thank you. One question also on state politics. There was recently a column in the Sacramento Bee stating that Jerry Brown will go down as one of the great governors of the state of California. Do you support that role, that position?
Oh yes, I think Jerry Brown is a great governor. I think Jerry Brown would, since he now has a residence in San Francisco, could be a good mayor. He will have nothing else to do after 2018. He has never really had a job. He's only held elective office. He is intellectually competent, and so don't be surprised if Jerry Brown takes that sterling example of 16 years as governor and parlays it into something else. I don't think that he envisions himself as running again for president. I think he's run for president 5 times or 4 times or something, and he's been unsuccessful at that. And it's unfortunate for the nation that he's been unsuccessful, but he is a very good governor. And in the term limit world, term limits have capped the opportunity to really develop talent in the halls of the legislature. You don't stay there long enough. Now with the 12-year term, you may very well be able to stay there long enough to develop all of the components you need to really be a fabulous state official on the legislative side, no matter what party you may come from. At the moment, the only person up there with all of those credentials is Jerry, and he demonstrates it every day of his life, period. And it's just incredible to watch him. 2/3 of both houses are Democrats, but none of that matters. There's only one person in Sacramento, and that's Jerry.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've taken care of our obligations for local and state politics. So, Donald Trump's in the White House. The Republicans control both houses of Congress. Hillary has been defeated. Who speaks for the Democratic Party?
Well, at the moment, the most prominent voice and the only one that is being heard is Nancy Pelosi. Schumer tries really hard, but my guess is that unless you know him from some other place, if he came in here, you wouldn't know that he was a U.S. Senator. He wouldn't be recognized coming through that door for many reasons. Almost no one else in Washington has the gravitas to be the symbol. And so Nancy, by virtue of having been the speaker and having a full set of brains, is by default. And that's not great for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party really needs lots of new talent on display. But that new talent on display is severely limited because when you're in the minority, you really, in the political sense of the word, you really are at a distinct disadvantage because you don't speak for policy at all. I mean, not at all. You have almost no influence. Nancy, having been the speaker and having been the architect of the method by which the Affordable Care Act was ultimately produced, has the credentials and the reputation and the respect. And at the moment, it's Nancy.
Well, there doesn't seem to be much of a bench right now for the Democratic Party.
There is no bench.
Well, who do you see as the potential individuals that might be in line for a run at the presidency on the Democratic Party side?
It's much too early to even envision who might be the nominee. And it may be the nominee will not come from any of the collection of names that everybody is throwing about, period. I am certain that, when people say Cuomo, who knows? He's the governor of New York today, but he may very well be old news. People talk about the young senator from the state of New Jersey, who clearly, as the mayor, knew how to get a lot of attention, but he's not been able to replicate that at the national level. And you have Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, a great consumer advocate, but she seems to have an absence of real warmth generated in her public presentations. You have Kamala Harris, former district attorney and attorney general, but she's only been there for 5 minutes, so to speak, and it would be a mistake to burden her with the obligation of trying to debate with Pat Leahy, a U.S. Senator forever, on matters involving his specialty issues. It would be a mistake to be comparing her with some of the other persons who are specialists in that category, including Dianne Feinstein. So she shouldn't be burdened with any of that some people are doing it, but it's a disservice to her. She does have lots and lots of talent and will in the future, I think, given the opportunity to really demonstrate on subject matter, she could be the next version of a Barack Obama, but on the female side. But it's much too early in 2020, would not be the time for her. And then there are other governors other than Cuomo around the nation who are on the Democratic side of the aisle that may very well, whose candidacies may very well. And then we have a dramatic change potentially by 20 in the makeup of some of the states, politically speaking. It wouldn't surprise me if the state of Nevada becomes a real Democratic state. They voted for Hillary, but they may even become the governorship, and the U.S. Senate seat may go that way. Colorado has a quality governor currently. He's got a difficult name, but yeah, he's still a quality governor, and he's kind of a fancy guy. And it could be that rising out of the South could come somebody, some Democrat may win the governorship in one of those southern states, and that person may blossom into a real firebrand when it comes to the question of tomorrow. But from the collection of people, somebody has got to master the ability to communicate on almost a daily basis using the advent of all of the social media, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, everything that's there. And it's got to be done in such a way that all these people on the millennium side, I mean, I was in a restaurant a couple of days ago, and there were 5 or 6 folk in there who were, those 30 years or something, and all of them have a ton of money, or many of them have a ton of money. But I watched them. I couldn't believe it. It was like a collection of my old friends, all of whom was paying Dutch treat. I think the bill was like $32, and they were standing there trying to figure out how to split it up. It was so embarrassing, I went over and picked up the bill. So somebody has got to figure out how to communicate with people who want to split the check.
In 2009, after Barack Obama was elected president, Mitch McConnell said that his number one priority as the head of the Republicans in the Senate was to make sure that Barack Obama did not receive a second term. And he led an obstructionist movement that was rather successful during those 8 years, except for the re-election of the president. Do you believe that that should be the way the Democratic Party should conduct itself from this point on? Should it become?
No. That was an attitude that has no place, in my opinion, in the world of politics. Once the election is over, the Congress is made up of 100 senators. The House is made up of 435 members. You cannot separate them by Democrats or Republicans full time, and you should not. It should be an effort made to make sure that there is the nation's interest supersedes each of the political parties. And that means that all of the participants ought to be participating not on the basis of adherence to the Tea Party or the evangelicals or the progressives or the libertarians. It really ought to be about whether or not we can figure out how to make matters work for the benefit of all the people. And I deplored when McConnell said that, and you are right, it translated into a number of victories in seats. And I'm telling you, those victories are coming unravel because suddenly, when you're in the majority, you now have to deliver. And I'm glad that Diane and her crowd have not said, under no circumstances will we take the position that everything Trump proposes as the president will not happen. As a matter of fact, Trump's having more trouble with the Republicans than he's having with Democrats, because after all, he was not a true Republican. He was whatever it took to get the nomination, and that is always troubling to people who are really party loyalties or what have you. And I'm kind of amused that his first trip abroad, I guess he is so concerned about his soul that he went on a religious tour. He started with the Muslims, and then he went down to the Jews, and now he's in the Christians, the Catholics. And he's trying his best, I think, to figure out how to see which one of them he thinks has got God's ear. And if he figures it out, that's the one he's going to be.
Well, the party's not going to be obstructionist. The limelight seems to have fallen on those who really want to have a strategy that moves the party more to the left, more to the liberal side. Do you think that's going to be a successful strategy for the Democratic Party over the next couple of years?
I think you're going to have to get away from labels. I really think you're going to have to go on the basis of what's in the best interest of folk. I don't think that the term progressive ought to have total control of what happens in the world of mental health. We really are a nation that needs serious attention on that issue, period. And I don't think that's a progressive issue. I don't think it's a conservative issue. It's an issue. These incidents of people doing stuff on the streets and we're considering it possible terrorist act, and then they turn out to be just somebody who was off their meds on that particular occasion. We really do need to be attentive to issues and not titles, and I'm becoming every day less impressed with people who says, I want to be a progressive, or I want to be a Tea Party. I condemned folk who did the Tea Party walls, and I condemn folk who do the progressive walls. If you're only doing the alleged progressive Tea Party, I want to hear from you if you're talking about how do we produce affordable housing for teachers, and how do we produce an opportunity for kids in the classroom to get away from being not attended to based upon their learning schedule. Every kid in the classroom can learn, period. They just may do it at a different pace, and they may just do it or with a different method of reaching them from the standpoint of student contact. We need to have somebody who's advocating that, period, and that's not liberal, that's not progressive, that's not conservative, that's human.
Okay. Donald Trump's budget that's being proposed has a number of components in it that will not support the base that he appealed to during his election. But still, the people who supported him are still supporting him very, very strongly. That 38% of the country. They still believe in him very strongly, even though he's proposing policies and legislation that will probably harm them. Why do they keep supporting him?
I have no clue. I said something earlier about mental health.
Okay. For our radio audience, you're listening to the Commonwealth Club of California radio program. Our guest is Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, and our political commentator, who is giving his views on the political arena in 2017. Let's talk about fake news then. The president keeps talking about fake news and keeps talking about the fact that he always gets negative coverage from the news. I'm sure that when he returns from this trip, he'll talk about the kinds of deals that he struck, or the business deals that occurred in Saudi Arabia, the arms deal, and a variety of other things. And we'll say that he hasn't really gotten coverage for the positive things he does. All he does is get negative coverage. Do you believe that the media is really taking a position that's going to just be negative against Trump?
Let me tell you, until I started writing a column and accepting a paycheck from the Chronicle, I had his attitude. As an elected official, I have always thought that the newspapers did not cover me properly. They did not cover me with the enthusiasm that my mother would want them. I did not think that the news organizations understood, and I thought in some cases they took me too seriously and too literally. I also thought that, before they'd write, they ought to clear with me what they were about to write. Most politicians will not tell you that that is really their attitude. We only want good press. We do not want criticism. Not unless it's those occasions when we know already you're going to forgive me, period. And so let's get it out there and not have anything written about it. And so Trump is amplifying the elected world's attitude toward people who cover you in the world of the media. Now, clearly, my colleagues in the world of the media will say, oh, no, Willie Brown was just talking. But I'm telling you, we really do, as elected officials, have the attitude that the press is hostile. He is just willing to aggressively argue because he has so many negatives in his term of performance. Why would you think you could ever get away with hiring Flynn to be your top guy on security? You got to be out to lunch if you think that that was possible. And you surely knew. On the other hand, the guy you got as your Secretary of State, why would you think that wouldn't be the criticism when the guy had negotiated all the contracts for fossil fuels coming out of Russia, and he'd gotten the highest order the Russian government can give to a civilian, equal to the Medal of Honor or the Congressional President's Medal of Freedom or whatever it is? Why would you think you're not going to be suspect or criticized for that based on your actual performance? And when you say some things, you tweet. If somebody could do something about slowing him down on the tweeting, I think he'd be better off at being able to generate a positive reaction beyond his core supporters on what he says about the press. He hasn't changed one mind in this country on what he said about the press. It really makes him feel good, though, to do what he does with the press. And sometimes he doesn't realize that they're really the press. His view with that black guy from NBC last week, when he granted that guy that interview, I never would have allowed him to do that, because that guy never challenged him on anything. He just let him talk. And believe me, he kept talking, and every time he said something, it contradicted something he said 2 days before and what have you. And the black guy was smart. He never reminded him that he went to the next one, and so he got another one, and then he went to the next one. And then, when you run out there with Kellyanne, the greatest phrase ever uttered, describing a lie is alternative facts. I mean, how could you have to live with that. And then you send one of your guys out to say that, no, at the time I visited with the Russian diplomats, we didn't discuss anything. And that's what the guy goes out and said, and an hour later, another one of the guys come out and said, well, yeah, we did discuss it, but it was not serious. And then all of that generates hostility from people who write, from people who record, and from people who broadcast. And so Donald Trump is going to consistently have a problem with the press because of a combination of all those things, and he has nobody. He does not have a George Shultz or Condoleezza Rice, or he doesn't have, you make Sessions your Attorney General? You got to be kidding me. You think somebody's going to take you seriously, that you have the universal world of the people you govern and the people you're in charge of? Sessions was rejected, had to withdraw as a candidate for the job that he now has several years ago because of his history. And believe me, his history hasn't changed, so to speak. So how do you think you're going to have anybody, you don't have to wait for him to screw up on a tarmac with Bill Clinton like Loretta Lynch did. You can just say, Sessions, it's bad news. And because that's his MO, that's who he is, that's what he talks about. And so when the press writes about all these things, they have so much to write about. And Trump's reaction to it is, he just wished they'd give him a break. Yeah, he should not have done Sessions, and maybe he should have done Christie or Giuliani. At least people already had some knowledge of who those guys were and what they were about, and you knew that they were not like potentially candidates for my new treatment program.
So we have him putting people in positions of power like Sessions and Steve Bannon and the high priestess of spin, Kellyanne Conway, who you mentioned earlier. But he's also gotten applause for appointing people to national security positions like McMaster and Mattis and Tillerson, for that matter. Do you support that position, that he should be applauded for the national security team has been put together?
I think that it is totally consistent to applaud any evidence of talent, even if it's a philosophical difference with the individuals who are there. I think it's equally appropriate to criticize when the talent does not reveal itself by way of the appointment process, period. And so you are correct. He has made some excellent appointments, but they do not cause silence to take place on people like Sessions or Kellyanne Conway or any of that crowd.
Okay. Donald Trump ran for the presidency as an amateur and someone who can improvise. Do you expect that we're going to see more candidates who are going to come out of the woodwork like him, people that have not come through the traditional path of politics, but multimillionaires or businessmen or people who really are improvisational amateurs?
I think he has ruined that path so far. There may be a recovery somewhere down the line, but as of now, he has ruined that path, and nothing but discouragement takes place, I think, with people like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or anybody of that ilk. When you think of the guy that he put in charge of the EPA, are you kidding me? You wouldn't dare do that. The attitude that comes right out of the guy, you would at least put somebody who is deemed objective, or you don't already know they have a preconceived notion about the environment and the way in which this guy does. And so I'm guessing that people who might have dreamed of the possibility of doing what Trump has done will probably have to abandon it because they will be treated a lot more harshly than he has been treated.
Okay. The press constantly refers to the fact that the Trump agenda is being pushed back, it's being impeded because of his tweets, because of the mistakes he makes, because of the comments that he uses to reverse himself over and over again. But isn't the Republican Party still moving forward? Isn't there still going to be a tax plan? Isn't there still going to be a variety of other legislation that's going to move the Republican policy agenda along, whether Trump's
I think the Republican Party, which is reflected in the leadership of McConnell and Ryan, will do the Republican Party bidding without reference to the president. There'll only be occasions when there will be a confrontation, as was the case with the issue involving health care. Clearly, the Republican Party had concluded that Trump's idea about repealing that act was totally wrong. There should be clear attention to the act to improve it in places where it may need to be improved, but to wipe it out completely, that was a bad step. I think they made that step with the clear understanding that the Senate probably will never hear that particular bill, at least in that form. 7 Republicans who voted for it in California who had been no before, I think are at serious risk. I think the effort that Pete McCloskey and others like Pete McCloskey, a Republican, made at the Democratic Convention this past weekend is only the beginning of what will turn into the same kind of wholesale replacement that occurred among Democrats when the Republican leadership was able to frighten people about what Barack Obama was in fact doing.
Right. But the Republican Party has stood for certain principles over a period of time. Opposition to growing deficits, a variety of other matters of that type. They seem to have tossed those aside recently. Are we going to have the same kind of rebellion against the Republican Party that we've seen against the...
No, the Republican Party is far too under control of the party apparatus, period. And they do take seriously the Republican core issues, and they will continue in that vein, period.
So we'll see, regardless of Trump, the Republican agenda moving along, whether there's trust in the
No,
president.
not regardless of Trump, in spite of Trump.
Okay. All right. One direct question from the audience. Should Senator Feinstein run for re-election?
I think Senator Feinstein, I think in late June, will turn 84. And I am a advocate of supporting older people. And I hope she runs, because the collection of people who are talking about running if she doesn't are really second rate, period.
Do you want to mention it? No, never mind. If the country doesn't have a strong bench, if the Democratic Party in the country doesn't have a strong bench, does the Democratic Party in the state of California have a strong bench?
The Democratic Party in the state of California has so many first-round draft choices in every category that it is, horror for Republicans to even think about trying to run. We have every statewide office. We have a supermajority in both houses. We have an overwhelming majority in the congressional delegation, and that's going to grow. There's virtually no city in California, except maybe San Diego, that has a Republican mayor in charge of it. The city councils, even the school boards. Our bench is so long and strong and deep that we can only screw it up if we don't deliver. And believe me, we need Republican help to deliver. And I'm pleased to see that the Caltrain electrification program was orchestrated appropriately, and that $647 million is now coming into California, and Caltrain will be, I think, a prototype to be modeled in other parts of the country where you need transportation components. And so I think that California will blossom period. I think, however, we need to be very careful that our internecine warfare doesn't start to take its toll. We've got to be respectful of our opponents among Democrats. We can't go in to destroy at all costs, win at all costs. We've got to stay where we got ourselves this fabulous majority.
You know, I can't let your comment about first draft choices slide by, especially since you've not been shy about talking about San Francisco quarterbacks in the past. But what do you think's happened with Colin Kaepernick? Do you think he's just been...
He'll be playing in Seattle.
Okay, somebody write that down. We have time for just one more question. We're drawing to a close now, Willie. And the question is, all of us who read your column have come to believe that you're actually a frustrated movie critic. Is that correct?
That is true. I really am into movies, and I wish that I could figure out how to get free admission, because it's really beginning to cost me. Unless you go before noon, the cost of going to a movie these days is like going to a play at the Curran. I mean, you know, I went to see a movie that I really didn't enjoy. I went to see Guardians of the Galaxy and at the Metreon. And I got there too late for the 10 o'clock show. And the 10:15 show, $20. Even when I told them how old I was.
Well, we hope that you'll wind up on the selection panel for the Academy Awards at some stage. Our thanks to Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Joseph Fink.
Thank you.
This meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California is closed.